We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday. Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, you're listening to this on Tuesday, but I did it Sunday. I don't normally do that. I don't like doing that because that puts me behind the eight ball sometimes. Something big happens and I get too far ahead and then I don't cover it in the podcast, which sounds stupid. But I have good reason for doing it this time. It's more of a precaution than anything else. I'm going out of town with my wife and my son and my granddaughter. Pretty excited about that. Um, and I'm going to be gone Monday and come back Tuesday. So that means I have to have a couple of podcasts in the can, as it were, so that when you come looking for the podcast, that it's there. Now, yesterday's podcast was kind of a different one. I did a live on TikTok and I turned it into a podcast too. Usually it turns out pretty well. I didn't get a chance to listen to it, but I think it was interesting. So hopefully you enjoyed that yesterday as well. And this one I'm recording, just me, and we're going to talk about some of the general things going on and things coming up this week. As I say, something big happens, I may be able to figure out a way to do something with the podcast. Normally, I would bring my computer along, but we're staying in one room suite with one bedroom. I got my son and my wife and my granddaughter, and I just don't know that I'm going to be in a position to actually record anything in terms of a podcast. I'll still be doing the TikToks, of course, because I can walk off alone someplace, but the podcast, I'm not sure. So I wanted to make sure there was something sitting here and ready for you to listen to when Tuesday came along. So with all that aside, we can get down to business, talk about some of the things. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of things to be concerned about. Some of it changing quickly, some of it not. So it does give us plenty to talk about. And fortunately, I have a bunch of emails that I got behind on because of the guest I had. So we can catch up on that. First one starts out, good morning. Watching Jim Jordan in Friday morning's press conference, I pondered two thoughts. First, Mr. Jordan does not present the calm presence of, say, Hakeem Jeffries. He seems to channel the high-strung, nervous energy of Barney Fife. I get that. I get that too. And unless you're of our age, you don't even know who Barney Fife is, but just Google that shit. Now, what you want in a leader or third in line to the presidency isn't Barney Fife. Well, that's true. They're all excited about being in power, but they just don't have the tools to do it. Secondly, the Republicans are not fielding a leader who can lead their side of the House in a cohesive or united manner. Nancy Pelosi knew how to manage. When first elected in 2018, the squad, AOC et al., were full of fire and wanted to change the world. Nothing wrong with that in Congress. That needs a tune-up, of course. However, I believe Pelosi worked with this group to direct their energy for the good of the party. And that's true. Anytime you get some young firebrands in, the older folks have to step in and say, calm the fuck down. We can do all this stuff, but you can't go off half-cocked. And, frankly, AOC and some of the squad were doing that. It's not surprising. They're young. They're excited. They see all the problems in government, and they want to change it right away. The unfortunate thing is nothing in government changes quickly. I mean, I think that's why people were disappointed when Donald Trump left office and Joe Biden was inaugurated. I still think a lot of people thought that the moment Donald Trump walked out of office, he'd be cuffed and dragged off to jail. That was never going to happen. And because it didn't happen, there were a lot of people disappointed and a lot of people saying, oh, it's never going to happen. I'm just going to fucking pout. Well, you can see it's taken a lot of time, but here we are. Donald Trump has 91 felony charges against him, more coming. He's got a lawsuit that's going to break him. He's getting his due, but it takes time. And just like getting anything done, even if we eradicate the Republicans in 2024 and have the Democrats take over power of the House, the Senate, and of course the presidency, that doesn't mean we're going to see things change immediately. You can't snap your fingers and change it. We've got to dig out of a fucking hole that the Republicans put us in. So we've got to be patient. And I know being patient isn't a lot of people's best qualities. There's a lot of people that are very impatient, and I am too sometimes, but you got to understand the circumstances and be kind of pragmatic about it. The end of the email goes like this: the result of the Republican House evolution from the Tea Party caucus to the Freedom Caucus is that no sane, competent person wants the leadership role. It is left to weaselly scammers, McCarthy, and bugger lugs. I don't even know what that is, the likes of Jordan or Green. Next up is George Santos for House Speaker. These people could learn a lot from any high school student council. Amazing and entertaining to watch. Paul. You're absolutely right. This is all historical shit. After we're long gone, our kids are going to look back at this and go, holy shit, that was fucked up. Kind of the way we look back at Watergate or some of the riots and the assassinations that we experienced. That's the thing about history. You got to try to learn from history. You got to try to gain some ground because, like they say, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And we're seeing some of that now. Some of the things that we struggled with back in the day are coming up to rear its ugly head. But the situation with the Republican Party is pretty amazing. And I don't even know if the Republican Party realizes how devastating this is for them. They're sitting on the edge of total disaster. And they don't seem to be understanding that. And they certainly aren't doing enough of anything to actually try to fix it. The problem is they're divided. You've got people that are relatively normal, and then you got the crazy fucks, and they can't come together. And until they can kind of agree on something, it's going to continue to be like this. I have some thoughts on how they're going to get this speaker thing fixed up, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right. Next email. Hey, Mike, what a bad week for Trump and MAGA. As I write this, Jim Jordan lost a third attempt at becoming House Speaker and is bleeding votes each time. Then we hear another lawyer flipped on Diaper Donny Trump. Cheese Bro takes a deal to avoid jail time. What the fuck is it with the so-called smart people throwing it all away for Don the Con? I mean, to be a lawyer, you would think you would take some sort of sense. Guess just not common sense. Oh, well, Trump's got to be losing his catch-up throwing mind with what's left of it. While on the flip side, what a fucking great POTUS. Yeah. Yeah, actually, Joe Biden, even though he doesn't get as much credit for it, is doing a great job. His speech after he came back from Israel was probably his best speech ever. And if anybody has question about Joe Biden's cognitive ability, all you have to do is look at that speech. He seemed very clear, very articulate, and very on point. You can't think this guy has some mental diminishment after watching something like that. Now, on the other side of the coin, you watch Donald Trump talking about running against Obama and all this shit. Yeah. Donnie's got some problems. He's fucking losing it. All right. The next email goes as follows. Hi, Mike. Dirty Diaper Donny once said there would be so much winning, we'd get tired of it. Who knew he was actually talking to Democrats and actual freedom-loving Americans? I was disappointed at first about Sidney Powell only getting probation, but she might have other charges coming. With her being on probation, she could still end up in prison if she violates her terms of probation. It's going to be interesting to see how she testifies against her co-conspirators. Kenneth Cheesebro has now also pleaded guilty. I guess he had a moment of clarity. Yeah, Sidney Powell was going to get probation, and he'd already turned it down once. I better get on board and stay the fuck out of jail. While he also got probation, he pleaded guilty to a felony, while Sidney Powell only had misdemeanors. Everyone in the Trump world should be paying attention and almost tripping over others to now get a deal. I'm guessing there won't be many more deals that don't have at least some jail time required. I realize that these judges are trying to give little Donnie Two Scoops the benefit of the doubt because they're trying to appear non-political. However, I think that's fine, given to Donnie for violating his gag order was way too low. I wasn't expecting Judge Engeron to give him jail time, but $5,000 to a guy supposedly worth hundreds of millions is a nickel to us. If they wanted to really prove something, it should have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Donnie was here in Iowa recently. I've seen clips of his crowd size, and it looked to be less than 100. I'm sure some of that is because he can no longer afford to pay people to attend. His influence is declining, and even if he isn't in jail before the election, I can't see him beating Joe Biden, let alone being the Republican nominee. Lastly, Jim Jordan's loss on the third ballot. It's time the reasonable Republicans put MAGA in their place. They need to denounce MAGA and the actions of MAGA voters. The threats are out of control. They need to decisively back Hakeem Jeffries. I'm talking like 100 or more Republican votes for Jeffries, and then oust all the MAGA members of the House. They need to clean their own house before they can lead this country, and it's time they did it. I know it's asking for a miracle, but I think it needs to be done in order to start getting past MAGA and actually doing things in favor of our country. Thanks, Eric. And of course, Eric is our listener who's been on the show a number of times. He's down in Iowa. Don't feel too bad about Kenneth Chesebro and Sidney Powell not getting jail time down in Georgia, because they ain't done yet. Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro have to still look at Jack Smith in the eye and find out what the fuck he's going to do. We know Sidney Powell and maybe even Chesebro are unindicted co-conspirators in his case against Donald Trump. We know superseding indictments are coming, and they're likely to be indicted. Now, the question is whether they've gotten on board and are flipping with Jack Smith's investigation. Here's something I wanted to mention. I heard this on TikTok, and I don't think people understand how this cutting deals really works. We've got Sidney Powell and we've got Kenneth Chesebro who have flipped, okay? They were offered deals because they have a lot of evidence. If they've got nothing more than probation, that means they got a lot of shit. It's going to go a long way. They wouldn't have been able to cut a deal if they didn't have a lot of evidence. Now, Chesebro's lawyer tried to act like, well, he never admitted guilt to this and he only agreed to that, and he's not tattling on anybody. I tell you what, I guarantee you Chesebro and Sidney Powell are going to talk. Otherwise, they're going to have to find a way to get money for commissary because they're going to jail. Even though they're on probation now, if they don't perform when it comes to the trial, they're going to jail. So they're either going to give it up or get put away. But that doesn't mean that Jack Smith isn't going to put them away. They're no doubt at risk of some federal crimes, especially Sidney Powell. Especially Chesebro. See, the thing you have to understand about Chesebro, he's getting convicted in Georgia. But what Chesebro was doing in basically being the architect of the fake electors, there's 7 other states that were doing the same thing, and he was involved in. So theoretically, he could get multiple states coming back and saying, oh yeah, we're going to indict you too, especially now since he admitted that he's guilty. So he could get hit with some other states. Jack Smith with a federal indictment, that's certainly possible unless Jack Smith allows him to flip. And that's the important thing. I was going to tell you about this TikTok I saw. I watch a lot of TikToks, and there's a lot of good information out there, good people doing it. I get a lot of tips, and then I take those tips and I kind of dig deeper and find out what the real story is. But every once in a while, you run across somebody who just doesn't know fuck all about fuck all. I saw this guy. He didn't have a lot of followers, but a reasonable amount. And he sits there all smug and he says, "This Georgia case, I know what's going to happen. Mark my words, I know what's going to happen." And he says, Donnie Trump's going to get real nervous and he's going to plead out and cut a deal so he can stay out of jail in Georgia. I beg to disagree. People apparently are under the understanding that if you're charged with a crime, you always get offered a deal. And that's not the case, especially in this Georgia case. Sure, they're going to give a deal to Sidney Powell. Sure, they're going to give a deal to Ken Chesebro. They might even give a deal to Jenna Ellis or any number of those lower level defendants. I mean, frankly, when they indicted these lower level people, I'm not talking about Meadows or I'm not talking about Chesebro and Sidney. They are actual criminals. But some of these people, they could have thought twice about indicting, but they're kind of like chum to get the big fish. You know what I mean? Get Donald Trump. You indict 19 people, maybe 12 of them flip and turn state's evidence, and then you've got this incredible case against the big fish. Now, the idea that Donald Trump is going to cut a deal makes no fucking sense. Donald Trump is the top of the heat. He is the target. He is the big fish. What would Donald Trump have to deal with? Who's he going to flip on? Well, there's nobody to flip on because he's the target. He's the guy. So the idea that we think that maybe Donald Trump may cut a deal in the Georgia case, that's not going to happen. This is going to be one of the biggest trials in the history of this country. Fani Willis has done an amazing job getting to this point. Do you think she's going to offer him a deal and then not go to trial? Especially for how egregious Donald Trump was in committing these crimes, trying to overturn an election in Georgia? That's not going to happen. He has nothing to deal with, and he has nothing to offer. So he's not going to cut a deal. So this guy on TikTok who knows for sure, mark my words, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't understand how the judicial system works, and you don't understand how cutting deals works. If I'm going to cut a deal with somebody, they better have something and I better have something so we can come together. But if only one side has something, they ain't no deal. They ain't no deal at all. So don't worry about Donald Trump cutting a deal with Fani Willis. That is not going to fucking happen. No way in hell. All right, let's move on. Hi, Boomer. The Ed shows are great. My man is wild. Yeah, Ed does a great job. I love working with Ed because I can get to him on a Thursday afternoon. We hit the button and we just talk. I'll just say, what do you want to talk about? And I'll say what I want to talk about, and we'll just go forward. There's nothing written down. There's no format. There's nothing like that. So yeah, I enjoy having Ed on the show too. And it's kind of nostalgic after all those years working with him on the air. It's kind of like going home again when he's here with me on the podcast. Anyway, the email continues. So when he comes on, my ears are trained to listen for you two to achieve an extra high level of intellectualism. I've never been accused of that. Right out of the blocks, you guys got to a pay-per-view to see people punch Matt Gaetz in the face. Well, I'm buying that event, and I'm not even sure that it's not a brilliant commercial idea. Yeah, we kind of go off on tangents now and again, but I want more. I know there's more. So wait, and boom, there it is. Donald Trump drinking Sterno through a loaf of Wonder Bread. Yeah, good point. Yeah, we can kind of go off on tangents. We would do that on the radio, and then the suits would get pissed off at us. Don't do that. Just stick to the script. And I typically I'd say fuck you, and And Ed was more of an amenable guy. I was more in your face. Um, what would happen with Ed is I'd say, fuck you. And Ed would call me and go, yeah, tell him to fuck off. Ed was more diplomatic than I, and that might explain why he stayed there longer at the radio station than I did. And it ends up saying, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thanks, Ed. Best garage door, Jeff. Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you picking out those finer points of the podcast with Ed and I. Next one goes, hello, Mike. Well, this is concerning. I'm waking up on a Saturday morning. Gates will stop at nothing to install MAGA at the highest levels of our government. I certainly hope that this fellow or his fellow Republicans don't take this bait. I can only imagine what they're hoping to do once Jordan is installed as Speaker. I'm thinking they will try to put an end to Trump's trials and have someone or group take out both Biden and Harris so that Jordan can become POTUS and can pardon Trump, at least for all of his federal crimes. Now, what you said is just fucking crazy. But what you said is also conceivable with the sick minds that are those of the Republican Party. That's just what's going on in my head as I read the news and play it through. I would love to know your take on this play by Gates and his group, though. Keep up the great work. You've got me as a loyal daily listener for well over a year now. And I think he sent something else here. Breaking news. All 8 Republicans who voted to remove McCarthy from the speakership are willing to accept censure, suspension, or removal from the conference in order to elect Jim Jordan. Well, this email came prior to the third election and them kicking Jim Jordan on his ass. Yeah, we could suspend and censure and remove all these fuckers from the conference. It goes on to say, if the holdouts who refuse to vote for Speaker designate Jim Jordan, we would be willing to do all of this. And that email comes from Mike T. You know, it's funny. People are wondering how this whole thing is working out with the Speaker of the House. And I have a theory on how it will work out. And I'm going to talk about some of the candidates that are looking to be Speaker. There's like 10 or 11 of them, most of which you've never heard of, none of which can get 217 votes. So I have a feeling the Republicans are still going to double and triple down and continue to try to elect whoever they want to elect. But the problem is this: the reason none of them can get 217 votes is because if the normal Republicans like them, the MAGA fucks will dump them. If the MAGA people love them, the normal people won't do it. And of course, the Democrats are not going to fucking help. I don't know why the Republicans think they need to help. So I think what's ultimately going to happen is it's going to get so close to the point where we are going to shut down the country again. Remember, we've got till mid-November. And if we don't get some kind of budget thing worked out, they're going to shut down the country. I think what's going to happen is some of the normal Republicans are going to get sick and tired of this. They're going to get frustrated, more frustrated than they already are. And what they're going to do is they're going to go to the caucus and say, here's the fucking deal. Let's get somebody in the speaker's job. Let's get them elected. Or we've got 5 Republicans that are going to go vote for Hakeem Jeffries, and then he'll be your next speaker. Now, I want you to understand something. That's not going to happen. But that threat is going to be there. That may be the threat that it takes to get it done. And then at that point, they'll have to figure out how to work this all out. Something needs to be done. You know, they talk, the one option that I thought was great, at least temporarily so, was the idea of empowering the temporary Speaker of the House, McHenry. I mean, that was a good compromise. Democrats felt okay with him. The Republicans, he's a Republican, so they should feel okay with him. But the problem is now the MAGA fucks don't like this idea. They don't like this idea at all. So that's off the table. Now they have to elect somebody. And the fact of the matter is there's nobody they can elect. They didn't want to go with McHenry because they thought they would be ceding power to the Democrats, and that doesn't give them a very good taste in their mouth. So we're gonna vote somebody in. Well, you guys promised us that Jim Jordan would get elected, and he didn't even get fucking close. Some of the other ones, we'll talk about them in a minute. None of them have a chance to get 217 votes either. So we're going to waste the next couple of days, maybe a week, while all this is going on and not tending to the business at hand, the things we need to get done. It's going to get close to the time when they're going to shut down the country, and people are going to be freaking out. You know, the thing about it is these votes to shut down the country or raise the debt limit, they are typically the easiest part of being in the House of Representatives. It hasn't been until this Congress or the Congress before that the Republicans make it so complicated and so difficult. And all the while leaves us twisting in the wind, because if they don't come through and they shut down the country, we're the ones paying the price, not the politicians. So it's frustrating to watch. And I think the Republicans, the normal Republicans, are more frustrated than anybody. Somebody on TikTok said this. They said, and it's somebody I like. I just think they're getting kind of a fatalistic attitude about it. They're saying that the Republicans will never elect a Speaker of the House because they want the chaos and they want to shut down the country. And I have to disagree with that. I mean, there is a small faction of people in the Republican Party that want to create the chaos and shut down the government, but there's the vast majority of the Republican Party knows exactly what this is going to cost them. If they shut down the country, they don't get a Speaker of the House, nothing gets done, it creates chaos, it's damaging to our country, and it will be the ultimate destruction of the Republican Party. I mean, even what's going on now is devastating to them in the upcoming election. Nobody's going to forget about this. Every commercial the Democrats put out will point out how they've completely fucked up the House of Representatives. So, but not everybody in the Republican Party wants that kind of destruction and chaos. In fact, the majority don't. And they're finally getting to the point where they feel like they've got to do something, which I find troubling because, with all the things that MAGA has done over the last 6-7 years, it's troubling to me that these alleged normal Republicans have finally had enough now. Think about all the things that fucking happened over those years, and it's not till now. The thing is, they were willing to go along with all the crazy shit as long as it meant votes for them. But now here we are with this current situation. Now they see they're going to lose money in votes. And now they're ready to push back. The Republicans in the House, the normal ones, are pushing back against MAGA. They should have put MAGA away, shut them down, took away their power, and just left them by the curb. They should have done that 6 years ago, but it wasn't expeditious for them to do it. They were still gaining benefits from having MAGA. Now MAGA has become a detriment to the Republican Party, and now they're done with them. It says a lot about the credibility and integrity of Republicans in general. But I think we're seeing the waning days of MAGA. They're becoming weaker and weaker every day. I mean, somebody has to ask Matt Gaetz, so you kicked Kevin McCarthy out. Why didn't you have a plan? You might say, well, I did have a plan. Well, that plan didn't work because you still don't have a Speaker of the House almost 3 weeks after the fact. You couldn't put it together. And this is because MAGA thinks they're so powerful, and they're not. The problem is the normal Republicans gave them the benefit of the doubt. They gave them the credibility for being powerful, and they should have never done that. The normal Republicans could have shut them down and kicked them out easy as hell, but they didn't do it. It's funny how Kevin McCarthy is referring to these MAGA fucks as the crazy eights. The 8 people that voted against McCarthy, they're calling them the crazy eights. You see, there's already a divide going on in the MAGA group specifically. I mean, Kevin McCarthy was on board there, and now Jim Jordan goes through this process. MAGA's intent was to get him and finish the fucking job, but MAGA couldn't do it. Over and above the fact that these people are evil, they're also incompetent, and they're showing us that every fucking day. Jim Jordan, from the moment the Republicans took control of the House, has failed at everything he's done. And then to have Kevin McCarthy stand up and spout off for Jim Jordan to be Speaker of the House. Matt Gaetz coming and saying, here's the most popular representative in the Republican caucus in the House, Jim Jordan, and he can't even get elected. Jim's the most popular. He may be the loudest. He may be the most obnoxious. I don't know that popular is the fucking term that you want to use with Jim Jordan. The most corrupt, the dumbest. He's definitely that. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, it is Tuesday as you're listening to this, and Michael Cohen is scheduled to be in court in New York in the Letitia James civil suit against Donald Trump. Now, he was supposed to be there last week, but he got sick. I don't know what was up with him, but apparently he is recovered and he's supposed to be in court today. Now, the interesting thing is Trump has been popping into court now and again. He's in there, he's grunting, he's grumbling, he's flailing his arms, he's showing how upset he is, but he's not talking much. He's been pretty well bridled while he's in court. He's been told a couple of times not to talk so loud or not to do this or that. But for the most part, he waits until the breaks, and then he goes out and he holds a press conference, and he spends that time mostly violating gag orders. But now Michael Cohen's coming in. And I know when he was in last week, he was hoping Michael Cohen would be there, and that he made fun of Michael Cohen for being sick, you know, Donald Trump. I presume that Donald Trump will be in court, at least for Michael Cohen, because what he's been doing, in addition to his grunting and grumbling and all that stuff, he's been mean mugging the witnesses so he can kind of intimidate them. You can't say certain things, so he just gives them a mean look. Oh, Donnie, you're so fucking scary. You're so intimidating. Donnie, you've lost a lot in the last year. You know, the 91 felony charges, you're going to lose all your money. Donnie, you ain't what you once were, and you're not that terrifying. And when it comes to Michael Cohen, I think he's the last of the people that are going to be scared of you. He's been ripping you on the TV news for the last 2.5, 3 years at least. He got hoodwinked. He got hoodwinked by you. He was caught up in the cult, and he was protecting you, and he thought you'd be there for him. And then, of course, you weren't. It's funny how people have to go through it directly in order to learn a lesson. After you saw what he did with Michael Cohen, why is Jenna Ellis surprised that he's not paying her legal fees? Donald Trump doesn't take care of anybody. He'll tell you he takes care of them, but he won't. He only takes care of himself. So I'm guessing Donald's going to be a little antsy when Michael Cohen's in there, because Michael Cohen isn't afraid to speak up and get in people's faces. And when it comes to committing financial crimes while in the Trump organization, There aren't too many people that know better than Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was his fixer. Michael Cohen called up and made threats to benefit Donald Trump. He knows exactly what's going on and is not afraid to bring it up. And this is when it's really tough for Donald Trump. And having known some narcissists, I get it. You get somebody and they're delivering some evidence that's pretty damning. A normal narcissist will speak up and talk loud and keep talking loud. You'll see it a lot in the media coverage. Whenever a Trumplafuck comes on a media outlet and they ask him a hard question, they start going off on a tangent and they talk loud and they talk fast and they don't stop talking because they know the moment they stop talking, the question is going to be asked again. That's what Donald Trump typically does. He basically tries to bowl people over, but now in court, he can't do that. And Michael Cohen is going to be saying a lot of stuff that Donald Trump does not want him to say. I can't imagine that Donald Trump thinks Michael Cohen should still be loyal after hanging him out to dry. I mean, hell, Michael Cohen spent time in jail for Donald Trump. He spent jail time for Donald Trump. And how does Donald Trump thank him? By talking shit about him, by not paying him and doing all sorts of things. It's fucking hilarious to me. It really, truly is. And I wish I could be in that courtroom to see it because it's got to be just a fucking comedy. Donald Trump is in the last position a narcissist wants to be. Be somewhere where you can't take over the conversation, control the narrative, and drown out the person who's pointing out the wrongs and the crimes that he committed. That, honestly, for a guy like Donald Trump, that is absolute torture. That's why he gets up and leaves sometimes, or that's why he goes out in the hall at the breaks and starts spewing stuff. That's his only defense. That's the only way he knows how to do things. It's about being a bully and talking louder than anybody else. Now, a lot of people fell for that over the last 6 years, and now we're seeing where it brought him. Now he's in a position where he can't be the bully in all circumstances, so he has to sit there and take it, and that's not something narcissists like to do. They do not fucking like that. And so I hope he's there when Michael Cohen's testifying because there's going to be some good stories coming out about that one. Because he'll come out in the hall later. Yeah, well, Michael Cohen was in jail. How can you trust a convict? Well, that's true, but he was in jail because he was protecting you, you fucking idiot. Let's talk about more fucking idiots. This was brought up in the email earlier. How is it that lawyers that have spent money on going to law school, developing careers to be trusted lawyers, I know that's an oxymoron, but anyway, why would they give it all up just to be Donald Trump's buddy? Well, because they're caught up in the cult. Two such lawyers, and that's an important thing to remember. These are Donald Trump's lawyers. Former Trump lawyers Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro have accepted plea deals from Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis, which eliminates the need for lengthy month-long trials. The former president's own racketeering trial could be moved up. That's a good point. You know, we're looking at a certain amount of time allotted for trials. There would have been a certain amount of time allotted for this trial. As much as it's scary to Donald Trump to have Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro, his former attorneys, testifying against him, that trial's not going to happen. So we don't need that extra time, so 3 or 4 months it takes to do that trial. That's off the board now. Everything moves up. So in addition to having these people testifying against him, it may speed up the timing on his court case. I think they set it for March, but if we don't have this court case, why not make it February or January or whenever the hell it's going to be? Now, in a column for Salon, legal experts Norm Ornstein and Joshua Kolb suggested that Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee suddenly has an open calendar to fill and could choose to move up one of the RICO co-defendants' cases and trials. that could include one featuring Donald Trump, and it could. We don't even know how that's going to break out. Are the remaining 16 all going to be tried at the same time? Is there going to be two other trials? What's going to happen with that? I know they were kind of holding off on deciding that until after this trial, but since this trial isn't going to happen, now that decision can come. So expect something to come out of McAfee and Fonnie Willis and the defense coming up with a plan, a new plan for the trial and when it's going to happen. And then maybe we'll find out who's going to be in any given trial. Is there going to be one with 16? Is there going to be 3 with 5? And here's the other thing you have to understand. Now that Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro have flipped, you're going to see a lot more people flip. It's not going to be 16 people going on trial. I wouldn't be surprised if you can get another 6 or 8 people that say, fuck it, I'm rolling. I don't want to risk going to jail for 20 years for a RICO charge. I'll instead see if I can get probation. And we talked about this earlier. Here's the thing. The first people that plead out are the ones that are going to get the deals, because Fonnie Willis doesn't have an unlimited need for everybody to flip. The first ones will get it, and then they'll come to a point where they'll say, yeah, we don't need you. We've got enough. I mean, we've got Sidney Powell and we've got Kenneth Chesebro. You smaller fish, we don't fucking need you. So I suspect, and by the time you listen to this podcast, it will be Tuesday. There could have been other people that have flipped by then. And if there is, don't be surprised. Over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see more people giving in and pleading out. I don't know how many of the final amount that will go to trial there'll be, but it ain't going to be nowhere near 16. And like I said earlier, those people who think that Donald Trump is going to have the opportunity to plead out and get probation, not going to fucking happen. Donald Trump doesn't have anything to trade. He's got nobody to flip on. He's the big dog. He's the top of the heap. He's going to have to go to trial. And Fonnie Willis is going to relish having one of the biggest court cases in the history of this country. She will set herself up for life, especially if she wins that case. And I can't imagine how she would lose it, especially from what we've seen thus far regarding her abilities. Now, these legal folks said, as they wrote, that would be an additional negative for Trump and his legal team, who are now facing 2 former Trump lawyers serving as witnesses for the prosecution after the plea deals. Again, we're not talking about Democrats. We're talking about Trump-la-fucks, and we're talking about his lawyers. That is pretty devastating. Who knows more about what Donald Trump's about than his fucking lawyers? The first Trump trial on these issues in federal court is not set till March. If Chesebro and Powell would get ready for trial on an accelerated basis. Certainly, it's not unreasonable for Trump and other possible defendants to prepare themselves to face a jury in Atlanta at some point in the coming months, they wrote. The 2 added an accelerated trial could also impact Trump's reelection bid. The twin admissions by Chesebro and Powell will now color the looming GOP presidential primary. That matters because the D.C. case will not be resolved until the primaries are over, they're suggesting. It's true. I mean, once these processes go, it's not going to take years once the trials start, but they've got to start the trials. We're talking a month to 3 or maybe 4 months once the trials start, depending on which case we're talking about. Donald Trump is going to be convicted before the election. And as I've said many times, I don't see Donald Trump as the nominee. He's going to have too much piled on his shit. He's not going to be able to do much of anything. Nonetheless, it's going to be interesting watching all this play out. Now, you see him popping in and out of the civil trial. Fact is, he doesn't have to go to the civil trial. He could stay home. Criminal trials, different deal. He better be there every day. And he's got a number of cases where he's going to be called to attend. And when he attends, he's going to be missing primaries. He's going to be missing campaign speeches. He's going to be missing a lot. Fact is, he doesn't have enough money to campaign anyway because it's all going to legal fees. Donald Trump is being bled. He's hemorrhaging money, and it's all going to legal defense. All right, we'll talk a little bit about the House. Of course, the House Republicans has a thin majority, has ensured that not only is there very little chance of the party uniting around a candidate of Speaker of the House that 217 Republicans could support, but the very basic components of governing are essentially impossible with this. Now, in A Piece for the New Republic, writer Matt Ford laid out how political morass that has effectively shut down the House of Representatives with seemingly no end in sight following Jim Jordan's failed third ballot on Friday. This is really causing some Republicans to feel pretty dejected and depressed with their offices. Earlier this week, for example, Representative Deb Lesko, a Republican from Arizona, posted a statement on X announcing that she would not be running for re-election. I don't blame you. It's a fucking shit show. Why would you want to be part of that? She said, I want to spend more time with my husband, my 94-year-old mother, my 3 children, my 5 grandchildren. I get it. I would too. I'd rather sit there with my grandchildren than fucking Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz. I get that. Spending on average 3 weeks out of every month away from my family and traveling back and forth to Washington, D.C. almost every weekend is difficult. Yeah, well, you knew that when you ran for election. In addition to Lesko, Representative Victoria Sparks. She's this Russian woman. How she ever became a Republican, I don't know. Also signaled that she was at her wit's end following the chaos and dysfunction. Yeah, the Republicans put the fun in dysfunction. They have defined the House of Representatives even prior to the ouster of the former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. She said, I've done many very difficult things, being one woman standing many times with many very long hours and personal sacrifices. But there is a limitation to human capacity, Sparks stated on October 2nd, several days before McCarthy was kicked out of the Speaker's chair. Now, if Congress does not pass a debt commission this year to move the needle on the crushing national debt and inflation, at least at the next debt ceiling increase at the end of 2024, I will not continue sacrificing my children for this circus with a complete absence of leadership, vision, and spine. Here's a Republican talking about the Republicans because they do have the majority. It's kind of on them as much as they want to blame the Democrats, and they do. Aside from the leadership vacuum, members of Congress are also dealing with a staggering increase in violent threats. According to a 2022 report in the New York Times, U.S. Capitol Police found that violent threats made to members of Congress increased by a factor of 10 between 2016 and 2021. I wonder why that is. With more than 9,600 incidents reported, it's likely this year we'll see an increase as some of those violent threats have come in recent days, according to the House Republicans who opposed Jordan's bid for Speaker. Yeah, we know that happened. That's the whole reason that they did the third vote. Jim Jordan, Matt Gaetz, and all the Trumplefucks unleashed the crazies and sent them off to make threats and harass their own people, their own Republican people. We were talking about it with Ed and how one guy said, we're not going to get violent, but we're going to molest you. How do you molest somebody without fucking being violent? Jesus Christ. Some of these people are just ignorant. And that's the problem, is we've got people that aren't the brightest folks doing the bidding of the MAGA fucks who aren't bright themselves. And they're doing it to themselves. That's the amazing thing. They aren't even worried about the Democrats at this point. They're trying to somehow get some unity in the Republican Party in the House, and the way they're doing it is through bullying and threats. Guys, it doesn't work that way. People aren't afraid of you, and people aren't going to come together just because you try to force them to do it. It's amazing that we're seeing this kind of behavior on this level. I mean, this is Congress, for God's sake. This isn't like a city council in some shitty little town in the middle of nowhere. This is Congress. You fucks should be better than that. You should have more wherewithal than having to play the bully and threaten people to agree with you. Because you know what? With the Democrats, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Every time they vote for Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries gets 212 votes, which is all the Democrats. They're unified. They come together, and that's why they have more power than the Republicans, who have a slim majority. Now, it was the thinking that was supposed to make Representative Jim Jordan the 56th Speaker of the House. An onslaught of pressure from the Republican Party base, allies predicted, would compel the GOP's moderate and establishment members to support Jordan, a hero of the far right and a joke to the rest of the country, and help him secure the votes for the gavel. And that's what I'm saying. The reason he went for that third time is because they started to employ those threats, and he just wanted to see if the threats worked. Well, he was mistaken, and he was disappointed because, in spite of all the threats, it didn't work. Jim Jordan got less Republican votes. He started out with 200, then he went down to 199, and then he went down to 194. That's the lowest vote any Republican has got for Speaker of the House in the last 50 years. And all the while, we've got Hakeem Jeffries getting more votes and winning more times than anybody ever in history. So it hasn't worked for them at all. They haven't been able to do anything. They're not going to be able to do anything. They have nobody who can get 217 votes. So it's going to be a while before things straighten out. At some point, they've got to say, hey, we fucked up. Let's do it differently. But that's not the case. That's not usually what Trump-la-fucks do. They just double down, triple down, quadruple down. Now, as the pressure campaign devolved last week into death threats against lawmakers and their families, something unexpected happened. Positions hardened, and a ragtag coalition of roughly 20 House Republicans rose up to deny Jordan the speakership. In spite of the fact they were being threatened, they said, fuck it. Now you made us mad. Now there's no way we're ever going to vote for you. You remember they went back in the room and Jim Jordan's trying to smooth talk and get people to vote for him. At that point, they've been threatened, their lives threatened, their families threatened. They aren't going to side with this dumb fuck. That can do no good for anybody if, in fact, they bend for Jim Jordan at any point. So that didn't work for Jim Jordan. Now they've got to figure out what to do. And frankly, they don't have any idea. They don't know what they're doing or how they're going to get it accomplished. And they're freaking out. They're frantic. They're panicking. Now, in doing so, they defied a belief of many in Washington that moderates have no backbone. That's what they think. Well, they found out different this time around. Representative Don Bacon said, bullying don't work, a Republican centrist who had led the opposition to Jordan's nomination. Still, Bacon said the harassing text messages and phone calls have taken a toll. His wife slept with a loaded gun near her bedside one night. Other Republicans said their families have been threatened, and every lawmaker who voted against Jordan has received a barrage of angry phone calls and messages. Yeah, these folks are losing fast. When they have to start fighting with themselves, when they have to start threatening themselves to bring unity to the caucus, that's when they've lost. They fucking lost at that point. There's no way out for them. And as much as they don't want to go to the Democrats for help, that's the only possible choice. They're going to have to go to the Democrats. And like I said, if it gets so frustrating and nothing gets done, I would not be surprised if 5 Republicans trying to push them to get the job done say, listen, if you don't do it by X date, we're voting for Hakeem Jeffries. He's the new Speaker of the House. We'll call it a day. Fuck yourself. That's maybe what it would take to get this done. And if they do it, well, we'll see what happens. Now, of course, we've got a whole spate of people wanting to run for Speaker of the House. So who are the people that are throwing their hats in the ring for Speaker of the House? Oh, man. It's a murderer's row. No, it's not. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer of Minnesota. Yeah, he's a Minnesota homie of mine. He's a dipshit Republican. He has been a Trump humper all along. I don't know if he's going to try to create the image that he's not anymore, but he has been. And he's from one of the rural areas where a lot of Trump humpers are hanging out. Next up is Kevin Hern, a Republican of Oklahoma. Who the fuck is he? House Republican Conference Vice Chairman Mike Johnson of Louisiana. Jody Arrington of Texas. Byron Donalds of Florida. Motherfucker's only been in office like 1 or 2 terms. He hasn't been there long enough to be Speaker of the House. And he's Republican and he's a person of color. He has no fucking chance. Representative Jack Bergman of Michigan. Representative Austin Scott of Georgia. Representative Pete Sessions of Texas. And Representative Dan Muser of Pennsylvania. So who do you think? Who would be the best choice? We can't know because we don't know anything about those fucks. Well, there does seem to be a favorite amongst that group, and that is House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, my Minnesota homie, a piece of shit. He is the natural front runner to be the next man up for the GOP's 3-week-long search for a speaker, except for one glaring problem: former President Donald Trump. Remember what I told you, no matter who they put up, if the normies like them, the MAGA won't. If MAGA likes them, normie won't. They'll never be able to get a consensus on who's going to be Speaker of the House. They never will be able to do it. So anyway, Trump's not a fan of Tom Emmer's. Trump holds a grudge, and if Trump doesn't like him, well, the MAGA fucks don't like him either. Trump allies in the media have already started blitzing Emmer with attacks. They did that on Friday, hoping to derail his House speakership bid before it can truly begin, all while boasting that ex-president agrees with them. Tom Emmer is Nancy Pelosi in a suit, one far-right news outlet declared, referring to the former Democratic speaker. Well, if he was Nancy Pelosi in a suit, I'd vote for him, but he's not. He's a fucking dipshit. After the ouster of Kevin McCarthy from the House top job and the subsequent failures of Jim Jordan, Steve Scalise to unite the bickering GOP, Emmer is the only Republican left who has previously won an internal party contest, giving him an obvious advantage over the mostly little-known representatives throwing their hats in the wind. Yeah, he's probably got the best name recognition, but I guess I'll bet you never heard of him. The only reason I've heard of him is because he's from my home state. That's the best they've got. But the best isn't good enough. Not for the Trump-la-fucks, because Donny doesn't like him. With the margin of error in the speakership fight so small, Emmer or another candidate can only lose 5 GOP votes on the floor. Those advantages may prove moot in the face of Trump's opposition. Trump's dislike of Emmer is rooted in both the Minnesota decision on January 6, 2021, not to vote to overturn the 2020 presidential election. We're a fucking blue state. We believe in rule of law. So yeah, we were against flipping the election for you, Donnie, even though he signed on to an earlier petition asking the Supreme Court to do so. So Tom Emmer was all in at first, but when the state didn't go for it, apparently Donnie held him responsible. And he also reportedly gave midterm candidates the wholly sensible advice that they should avoid focusing on Trump, who remains obviously unpopular with most of America while running for office in 2022. Now, Trump has yet to play a serious role in the speakership. He made little effort to save Mike Kevin, as he called McCarthy, and his endorsement of Jordan for the job did not significantly move the needle. And when the votes were going on, he didn't say a fucking thing. He endorsed Jim Jordan. And of course, like everybody he endorses, they always lose. We know what happened in 2022. I don't know if Jim Jordan was happy about getting Donald Trump's endorsement or not, but it didn't work. Now, Trump's yet to personally weigh in on Emmer's run, though allies have told a host of outlets that he opposes the Minnesotans' bid for leadership. Spokesperson for Emmer's leadership office was conciliatory in a statement to Politico. Whip Emmer worked hand in hand with President Trump to help House Republicans fire Nancy Pelosi and retake the majority. If he becomes Speaker, Whip Emmer looks forward to continuing that productive relationship. For now, Trump-aligned commentators, including former White House strategist Steve Bannon, are using social media and podcasts to suggest that Emmer is a swamp creature unaligned with the Make America Great Again movement. Emmer voted with Trump roughly 90% of the time during the presidency of Donald Trump. But Bannon devoted most of the Friday edition of his War Room podcast to bashing Emmer. Tom Emmer, the biggest never-Trumper in the House, a guy who hates Donald Trump, Bannon declared, while also slamming McCarthy for backing Emmer. Here's the probability Tom Emmer is going to be Speaker. 0. And I tend to agree. If MAGA doesn't like him, they aren't going to vote for him. And I'm not sure the regular normal Republicans really are a big fan either. That's what I've said. You can put up all these candidates, but can any one of them get 217 votes? I don't fucking think so. That's why, in the end, as much as they're trying to fight it, they're going to have to sit down with the Democrats and work something out. They don't like that idea. I don't think MAGA will ever be willing to do that, but they don't have to have MAGA to do that. We just need some of the normal Republicans to get on board, and we can do something that's reasonable where we're going to get some things done. But then that's going to cause these Republicans to have to go along with some things that the Democrats want. Because if the Democrats help these fucks, they are definitely going to have to give something up. Excuse me. Now, as we get to the end of the Rational Boomer podcast, here's something interesting regarding the war in the Gaza Strip. Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, another Trump-la-fuck, said he thinks the release of the 2 American hostages by Hamas on Friday was a delay tactic. And I tend to agree with that. They've got like 200 hostages and they let 2 go. I think Hamas is really concerned about a ground attack by Israel. I mean, we're talking about 300,000 fucking people. It's going to be bloody and it's going to be a mess. So I think Hamas is going to keep handing hostages here and there to kind of fend off the ground attack. Bolton went on to say, well, obviously we should be very happy that at least 2 people have been let go, Bolton said in an interview with Newsmax, that paragon of news. But given the way Hamas put it, and given what we know about Hamas and how it operates, what the character of its leadership is, I have to say, for those concerned with the other hostages, I think this is just an entirely cynical move by them. And I have to agree. I mean, they are in fact a terrorist organization. So they're going to want to play these games, not unlike Trump-la-fucks who want to divert, distract, and delay. Hamas has every reason to want to delay it. because they will not survive a ground attack of 300,000 Israelis. It's just not going to happen. Hamas isn't big enough. They aren't strong enough. And then, that's the question. Why did they even attack in the first place? I know there's a lot of details about the war on both sides, Israel and Hamas, but it just didn't make any sense that they sent off some missiles. That's why I've always said they have to have some kind of support. We know that if the Israelis do send in ground troops, Iran has made some noise that they're going to get involved. And of course, we don't want that. People talk shit about Joe Biden standing with Israel, but they are our allies and they have to do that. But what you have to understand, Joe Biden isn't there rooting for the Israelis to go in and massacre Hamas and whoever else. He's trying to quell that a little bit, trying to calm everybody down so we don't have massacres in the Gaza Strip. I mean, more massacres than we already have, because that's exactly what has happened. Hamas is going to try to delay the ground attack as long as they can. But Israel's not very patient. They're very angry about what happened in this situation, and they are going to want to get revenge. This situation in the Gaza Strip can't help but get even uglier than it is, and it's pretty ugly right now. It's a sad thing. As I've said, this is a conflict that's been going on for decades and decades and decades. And all we can do as a country is support our ally. As much as some people don't like it, that's what we've got to do. We've got to support our ally, and we've got to do what we can to calm things down. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. If there was to be a president to help mediate this and slow it down and make it not as messy as it could be, Joe Biden is probably the best person for the job. He's got the most experience. He's got the most diplomatic experience. He knows some of these people in Israel and over in Gaza. So if there's anybody that could help settle this down a little bit, if it's possible at all, Joe Biden would be that guy that could do that. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, the days this week bring us good news as opposed to the bad news we're used to getting. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. I hope you have a great day. And of course, we'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm back in town on Tuesday, so the podcast you'll get on Wednesday will be done early Wednesday morning, and we'll be kind of in sync again. So have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.